You wrote, I was wrong, and Terfs, gender criticals, and conservatives were right all along to hold the line and refuse to give an inch to any aspect of transgender ideology. I'm sorry I ever doubted their approach. What did you mean by that?
I have a new perspective that I didn't have before, I guess you can say. You know, it was sort of like a realization that I hadn't really given much thought to before. You know, within like the broader coalition, you know, there's the different groups we have with the different focuses. Like the gender medicine issue, which is what I almost exclusively focus on, requires a much kind of different, gentler approach that takes on the stance that, you know, the people who are caught up in gender ideology are, they're vulnerable, because you can say they're like victims in a way. And that, I think, really shaped my view of things. But then there are the other issues, of course, like men and women's bathrooms and prisons and shelters and sports teams. And that requires like a firm, hardline approach, because in that context, like a softer approach can backfire. The concern isn't really about vulnerable youth. It's about men with fetishes taking advantage of self-ID laws and like getting off on being in control. And that was something I didn't fully appreciate, I think. And over the years, like there were a few times I just kind of clashed with people online who had that approach. I thought I knew better. And then I sort of had an experience where I realized that I was wrong. I mean, all of it all has to go. So I kind of understand now the anger and the fear and the anxiety that a lot of women face in their personal lives, because and I understand why there's so many women who are gender critical accounts that are anonymous. It's because they likely feel like powerless and voiceless in their personal lives, because they can face serious repercussions if they were to say what's on their mind. And I was just so kind of narrowly focused on the gender medicine issue that I neglected to think about these other kinds of concerns that people have. And I am, you know, I'm gonna take their concerns more seriously from now on.
Well, it takes a lot of courage to admit to being wrong and to change your mind publicly. I think that it commands respect when people do that. I think a lot of people worry that if they change their minds publicly, you know, people like us who are in the public realm and share our opinions, especially about controversial things online all the time, you know, you're a journalist, you know, I'm a writer and a journalist and a podcaster, and this is what I do for a living. So you want people to take you seriously and trust you. And so I think some people worry that if they change their minds or admit to being wrong, that they'll lose trust in the public eye, and people will maybe think, oh, well, you're flip-flopping all the time. How can I trust you? But I think the opposite is true. Because when people admit that they're wrong, or when they say that they've changed their minds and they explain why, it shows that they're honest and that they have integrity and that they actually are paying attention to truths or research or facts, and then, you know, operating accordingly rather than just holding strong to an ideology or a belief or an opinion, you know, out of stubbornness, or so that, you know, they don't lose that public trust or whatever reason.
Yeah, I have no problem admitting when I'm wrong. I have like a real aversion to inauthenticity, and I think that's it's so difficult to like have something to say but keep it to yourself. I have a really hard time with that. I struggle with that.
Same.
And I think I understand now what a lot of women have been facing. And like there's a real I just didn't really want to see people who I was defending as malevolent, but there is a real darkness and manipulation that I just didn't see before. It's just, I kind of naively believed like if we just give them all, the right information, all of this will go away. But there's some real cognitive blocks in place for some people. There's some really other powerful motivating factors that will prevent people from joining reality with the rest of us. Most notably that's autogynephilia, because the trans biology narrative allows them to justify acting out their fetish in public, and that's that evokes a lot more sympathy if they're able to tell people like, oh, I just have a lady brain. I was just born this way. And I think that's just too powerful to give up.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I've spent a long time, many, many years trying to figure out people's motivations who go along with the narrative and support the narrative, not just the men who are identifying as women in order to access women's spaces or dominate conversations or, get attention or whatever, narcissists do as narcissists do. But and I think there's a lot of different reasons why people go along with these narratives. And some people do it sincerely because they buy into, for example, this idea that you can be born in the wrong body or have, a male brain and a female brain and vice versa. I think some people don't want to lose their jobs. Some people, it's about money and they can make money off of this ideology, narrative, practice. I've heard some people say, and they're probably right, that, for example, when we're wondering why otherwise critical, intelligent people won't speak out against transgenderism, gender identity ideology, people have family members or somebody close to them who identifies as transgender and they don't want to offend that person and hurt them. But yeah, either way, I mean, I'm very happy with the direction that we're going in the public realm. And I think that does have a lot to do with these challenges to particularly the born this way narrative and this idea that children need to be transitioned and that puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones are some kind of like medical treatment for kids who were born trans and they'll never be happy to the point where they'll be suicidal when they get older if they don't transition, if they aren't sterilized and mutilated, because of course that's the result of these medications and these surgical practices. So I really appreciate the work that you've done and Colin and the rest of you. I also, like you, have an aversion to anything that doesn't feel authentic. So I have no problem changing my mind in public or admitting that I'm wrong either. I'm not good at not saying what I think. And I don't really want to be good at not saying what I think, but it feels like next to impossible for me to not, speak the truth and say what I think. So I relate to you and I appreciate that and I like that about you.
Yeah. Well, I like that about you too. I hope we get to see each other again soon.